Martin Luther King Jr., one of the most important figures in the civil rights movement in the United States. Dr. King was born in Atlanta, Georgia in 1929. He grew up in a Baptist family, and was heavily influenced by his father, who was also a Baptist minister. From a young age, Dr. King showed a passion for social justice and equality, which would eventually lead him to become one of the most prominent leaders in the civil rights movement. Dr. King began his career as a minister, and became the leader of the Montgomery Improvement Association, which was formed to boycott the Montgomery, Alabama buses following the arrest of Rosa Parks for refusing to give up her seat on a bus to a white person. The boycott lasted for more than a year, and it was a major victory for the civil rights movement. In 1963, Dr. King delivered one of his most famous speeches, the I Have a Dream speech, during the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. In this powerful speech, he called for an end to racism and for equality for all people, regardless of their skin color.
I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream
Dr.
today.
King faced many threats throughout his life. He spoke about the death threats that he received.
Yes, I have been threatened many times. There was a time that we received as many as 30 and 40 threatening calls a day. And of course, I received numerous threatening letters. My secretary has come to the point now that she doesn't show me most of these letters, but occasionally I come across them. Within the last few days, I remember receiving a threatening letter, and they say such things as this: you are causing too much trouble in this town, and if you aren't out within 10 days, you and your family will be killed. Now, in Montgomery, our home was bombed twice, and I guess these were the most severe instances of violence that we confronted. But even today, we still confront threats through telephone calls and through the mail.
Dr. King also delivered many other speeches throughout his career, including the Get Rid of Racism speech, in which he spoke out against the injustices of racism and urged people to work together to end it. He also gave a speech in 1967, called the If You Can't Fly, Then Run speech. In this speech, he encouraged people to keep fighting for their rights and to never give up hope.
For everybody, and for all institutions, for the public sector and the private sector, to work to get rid of racism. Now, if we are to do it, we must honestly admit certain things and get rid of certain myths that have constantly been disseminated all over our nation. One is the myth: the Negro must lift himself by his own bootstraps. They never stop to realize that no other ethnic group has been a slave on American soil. The people who say this never stop to realize that the nation made the black man's color a stigma. But beyond this, they never stop to realize the debt that they owe a people who were kept in slavery 244 years. In 1863, the Negro was told that he was free as a result of the Emancipation Proclamation being signed by Abraham Lincoln. But he was not given any land to make that freedom meaningful. It was something like keeping a person in prison for a number of years and suddenly discovering that that person is not guilty of the crime for which he was convicted. And you just go up to him and say, now you're free. But you don't give him any bus fare to get to town. You don't give him any money to get some clothes to put on his back or to get on his feet again in life. Every code of jurisprudence would rise up against this. And yet this is the very thing that our nation did to the black man. It simply said, you're free, And it left them there penniless, illiterate, not knowing what to do. And the irony of it all is that at the same time that the nation failed to do anything for the black man, through an act of Congress, it was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did it give the land, it built land-grant colleges to teach them how to farm. Not only that, it provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, as the years unfolded, it provided low interest rates so that they could mechanize our farms.
If you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But by all means, keep
moving. In 1967, Dr. King also delivered a sermon at the Ebenezer Baptist Church, in which he spoke out against the Vietnam War, calling it an enemy of the poor. He said the war was diverting resources and attention away from the fight for civil rights at home. Dr. King also played a key role in the passing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibited discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. This law helped to end the era of legal segregation in the United States.
Today we are fighting an evil, unjust war in Vietnam. And our leaders have neither the courage or the maturity to admit that we made a mistake. I believe that the Lord told me to say to the United States of America that is sick with militarism and is sick with excessive materialism. Have you ever thought about it? There are between 38 and 50 million people in the United States of America who are poverty-stricken, making income less than the poverty level. And yet, this is the richest nation in the history of the world. Our national gross product this year will go beyond $800 billion. And yet, there are between 38 and 50 million people who are poverty-stricken. Now, there's something wrong. I don't mind saying it. A lot of people are afraid to say it. But I don't mind saying it. You see, somebody said to me the other night, don't you think, Dr. King, you are going to have to start speaking more in terms of the administration's policy? Because since you started talking against the war in Vietnam, it's hurt the budget of your organization, and people who once respected you don't respect you anymore. And I had to look over and say, sir, I'm sorry, but you don't know me. I'm not a consensus leader. I don't determine what is right and wrong by looking at the budget of my organization, and I don't determine what is right and wrong by taking a Gallup poll of the majority opinion. I'm going to be honest enough to tell you that I'm worried about America. I'm worried about our nation because it's sick with racism still. Just think about the fact that we live in a nation which was founded on the principle that all men are created equal. And yet men are still arguing over whether the color of a man's skin determines the content of his character. Sick with racism. Our nation is sick with militarism. Any nation that spends some 70 or 80 billion dollars on military pursuits is headed toward its spiritual doom. And so, because there's something wrong, our struggle must continue. A bush if you can't be a tree. If you can't be a highway, just be a trail. If you can't be the sun, be a star. For it isn't by size that you win or you fail. Be the best of whatever you are. If you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But by all means, keep moving.
Dr. King was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, in recognition of his nonviolent campaign for civil rights. He was the youngest person to ever receive the prize at the time. Sadly, Dr. King's life was cut short when he was assassinated in 1968, but his legacy lives on. His message of nonviolence and equality continue to inspire people all over the world to this day.
I have the great honor, on behalf of the Nobel Committee, to hand over to you the insignia of the Nobel Peace Prize.
Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not